Okay, so let's get right back into this second definition, or I guess it's the third one, the second real definition, but technically the third definition. Okay, so um, Socrates says that we're going to amend the definition to this. So, what is loved by all the gods is pious, and what is hated by all the gods is impious. So, is that the definition we shall go with? And Euthyphro says, well, okay, sure, why not? It seems pretty good to me. And Socrates says, well, just wait. Now, but it's here, this isn't abundantly clear in the conversation, but there's an implication here that if the gods love and hate different things, so on some things they're at war over and there's discord over, and then on other things there is not. Um, there has to be some explanation for why this is the case. Okay, so with respect to the Trojan War, I mean, if some of the gods love the Trojan War and other gods hate the Trojan War, there just has to be an explanation for why things like that they're at war each other over. They disagree. But when it comes to the murderer being prosecuted, specifically this case of Euthyphro prosecuting his own father for murder, if they all love it or they all agree upon it, there has to be some explanation why this is the case. Now, and it can't be explained, it seems, just by the mere individual attitudes of the gods. So if we're just going to say, well, why do the gods disagree with each other about the Trojan War, and why do the gods all agree with each other about, Euthyphro prosecuting his own father? Well, they just do. There's no real fact of the matter about why they all love it in this case. But then, things like the Trojan War, of course, they're at odds with each other. That's not going to cut it. There has to be some kind of explanation. And it can't be just the individual attitudes that the gods have. So Socrates is getting at there has to be something about the nature of the situation itself, which explains why all the gods have this particular kind of attitude about it. So, I know it's not technically true, but let's just assume it's true that everybody loves ice cream. Let's just assume that that's true, even though it's not. Well, not everybody loves mustard. Okay, well, it seems then if everybody loves ice cream, but not everybody loves mustard, then there has to be some explanation. There has to be something about the nature of mustard itself, such that not everybody loves it. And there has to be something about the nature of ice cream itself, such that everybody loves it. And the same would apply in this kind of case here. So that's kind of the pretense for Socrates' questioning. Well, there's got to be some explanation for why they disagree on other things, but they all agree on this one thing. And it has to be explained by some feature of the thing itself or the situation itself. So if the gods all love what is pious, there has to be something about the nature of piety itself such that that explains why all the gods love it. That's the direction that he's going here. Okay, now, but he puts it this way by asking this question. Is it pious because all the gods love it, or do all the gods love it because it is pious? So this came to be known as the Euthyphro dilemma. Okay, so is something pious because all the gods love it, or do all the gods love it because it is pious? Okay, so does something have the designation of being pious simply because all the gods have a certain kind of psychological attitude about it? Or do all the gods have that psychological attitude about it because of the nature of the thing itself? That's what we're getting at here. Okay. And Euthyphro at first just does not understand the question. He goes, I don't know what you mean, Socrates, when you say, is it pious because all the gods love it, or do all the gods love it because it is pious? I'm lost there. Okay, so Socrates tries to explain it this way. He says, well, clearly there is a difference between an act and something that is in a given state because of the act. So there is a difference between being in a given state in virtue of something acting upon that thing and the thing that is, being acted upon. There's a principal difference between these two things. There's a formal difference between these two things. Okay, so clearly there is a difference between carrying a basket and a basket being carried. There's a difference between the active and the passive. Okay, so what Socrates is getting at here is he wants to understand the nature of what we would call explanatory priority. Okay, so is the act of carrying explanatory prior to the state of being carried, or is the state of being carried explanatorily prior to the act of carrying? So what explains what here? So are baskets carried because they are in a state of being carried, excuse me, or vice versa? All right. So Euthyphro says, well, I mean, it seems clear something is in a state of being carried because it's being carried. You can't have the state of being carried without the act of being carried. So the act has to be formally, explanatorily prior to the state of being carried, or the act of loving has to be prior to the state of being loved. Okay, so we are saying that the gods are engaged in an act of loving towards the pious. Okay, and are they loving it because it's loved by them, or is it loved by them because they love it? So which is it here? I mean, so Euthyphro says, well, yeah, clearly something is loved by the gods, loved by all the gods in this case, because they all love it. So it is the act of all of them loving it which makes it in the state of it being loved by all of them. Or it's not loved because it's dear to them, but it's dear to them because they love it. Okay, so that's the difference here. So the pious is in the state of being loved by all the gods, but the reason why the pious is in the state of being loved by all the gods is because they all love it. He says, so I ask again, is something loved because it is holy, or is it holy because it's loved? So he says, all right, so here's what you're going to say, Euthyphro. Is something pious because it's loved by all the gods, or is it loved by all the gods because it's pious? And Euthyphro says, well, they love it for no other reason than that it is pious or holy. So the gods all love what is pious for no other reason than that it is pious. So Socrates says, okay, so just so we're clear here, you are saying that it is loved because it is holy, and it's not holy because it's loved. And Euthyphro says, yes, I commit myself to that. So Euthyphro commits himself to, let me go back here. Euthyphro commits himself to the second horn of the dilemma. So we've got, is it pious because all the gods love it, or do all the gods love it because it is pious? Euthyphro says all the gods love it because it is pious. For no other reason do the gods love it. They love it because it is pious. So it is the fact that it is pious that explains why all the gods are engaged in this act of loving it. And the same with the ice cream example. Okay, well, how come everybody loves ice cream, but not everybody loves mustard? It's not they just do. We might say something like, okay, well, ice cream is a sweet and creamy treat, and mustard is vinegary and has a strong bitter kind of flavor. What we're going to point to actual differences between the two things. Okay, so if the gods all love something, they're going to love it because it's pious, and there's going to be marked differences about the state of affairs itself that is going to be different from things that they disagree on or things that they all hate. So it's differences in the states of affairs themselves which explain why they either all love it, or some of them love it and some of them hate it, and they all hate it. Okay, so that's a really important distinction here. Okay, so this is where things get problematic, though. All right. So Euthyphro says the gods all love what is pious because it is pious. Why are all the gods engaged in the act of loving the pious? They are all engaged in the act of loving it for no other reason than that it is pious. Okay, and what is the definition of what is pious? What is pious is what is loved by all the gods. So the gods all love what is pious for no other reason than that it is pious. And what is pious is what is loved by all the gods. Now, so if we substitute the word pious with its definition, and what is the definition of pious? The definition of pious is what is loved by all the gods. So what do we have? So the gods all love what is pious because it is pious. And the definition of what is pious is what is loved by all the gods. Therefore, the gods all love what is pious because it is loved by all the gods. So, again, the gods all love what is pious because it is pious. And what is pious is what is loved by all the gods. Therefore, the gods all love what is pious because it is loved by all the gods. Doesn't take a genius to know that that is not going to work. Okay, now, why? The problem with this definition is that it gets the explanatory priority backwards. It can't be the case that all the gods are engaged in the act of loving because there is something that is the recipient of all of their love. So the problem with this definition is it gets the explanatory priority backwards. It can't be the case that something is in the state of being loved by the god. I'm sorry, I got it backwards. It can't be the case that the gods are engaged in the act of loving something because there is something that is the recipient of all of their love. That is not going to work. So that's why Socrates keeps saying, well, that must mean then that the pious and the god loved are not the same thing, right? It can't be the case that the pious and the God loved are all the same thing. Why? Because all the gods love all the gods are engaged in the act of loving what is pious because it is pious. But it can't be the case that all the gods are engaged of loving something that is loved by all of them, right? It can't be in virtue of the fact that it's loved by all of them that they all love it. So that must mean that the God loved and the pious must not be the same thing. Okay. Now, then Euthyphro is a bit at a loss here after Socrates dismantles this definition. Socrates keeps asking for, you still need to tell me what the pious is and what the impious is, and Euthyphro kind of says, well, I don't know what you want. I mean, I'm trying here. Okay, so then Socrates actually introduces somewhat the next one. He asks the question whether or not that which is pious is necessarily just. Okay, so if we're going to talk about piety and justice, are these things related somehow? Must the pious always be just and the just also be pious? How are these things related? And after some conversation about the difference between the two, so analogously, Socrates discusses the difference between fear and reverence. Okay, so you can't have reverence without fear, but you can have fear without reverence. I mean, so I can be afraid of something without revering it, but I can't have reverence for something without having some kind of holy fear for it. I mean, that's what the term reverence just means, having a holy fear. So we've got this distinction here between the general and the particular. So in talking about the pious and likewise the just, how exactly are these things related to each other? Okay, so, and this is the understanding that Euthyphro, through the course of conversation, comes to. That is this. He says, piety or holiness, Socrates, appears to me to be that part of justice which attends to the gods. Piety or holiness, Socrates, appears to me to be that part of justice which attends to the gods. So here's where we kind of get this third definite, or this fourth definition at this point. So a pious action is a just act that's done unto the gods for some reason. Now, but it's here that things get kind of odd. And this is consistent through Socrates' thought here, and even for Plato. There's this notion that justice always has an improving quality. So to act justly towards something is to attempt to improve that thing or to accomplish justice in society, to create just laws. Um, the laws are just if society is somehow improved upon by having those laws. So there's a theme here which justice works towards improvement and injustice works towards making things worse off, harm, um, disintegration socially, those kinds of things. So just laws are those which improve upon society. Unjust laws make society worse off, those kinds of things. So, and if attending to something is designed to be in service to that thing or improving upon that thing, so talking about horsemanship and various forms of craftsmanship. Um, you know, so if I'm taking care of horses, I want to improve the horses' situations. If I'm intending to something, I'm not only preserving it, I'm wanting to make it better. So Socrates makes this suggestion. He says, um, would you say that when you do a holy act, you make any of the gods better? I mean, so it's kind of comical because it's almost like he's charging Euthyphro with blasphemy here. He's saying, now I take it you don't mean that our, attending to the gods somehow improves upon the gods' situation. I mean, what is it that we ourselves can do to improve the gods' situations? Well, what does it mean to attend to the gods? So if piety is just attendance to the gods, um, how exactly is this going to work out? So how exactly is our doing just actions unto the gods at all attending to them or improving their situation? And Euthyphro very quickly says, "Oh, no, I don't mean to suggest that anything that we can do can kind of improve upon the gods. I mean, because what would it mean to improve upon the gods? To improve upon the gods would be to make them more godly, right? So to improve upon something is to make it more like itself, or to improve its conditions. I mean, so to improve upon the ideal. Okay, so what is the ideal of a god? Being a god. So if you're a god, you're already kind of the ideal category. So if you're a god, you can't be more godly. You can't improve upon your godliness. So not only can gods not improve upon their own godliness, but human beings certainly can't increase godliness or improve upon the godliness of the gods, make the gods more godly. So okay, well then, what does this even mean? Um, so Euthyphro specifically talks about giving prayers and offerings to the gods and sacrifices to the gods, and this just involves asking the gods what we want, and we do these things because they improve human relationships, not necessarily human god relationships. But the problem here is, okay, well, wait a minute. If this just concerns human relationships, then we're not attending to the gods, we're attending to each other, right? And this is part of that initial conversation about how justice and piety are related to each other. So justice would be a general category. Why? Because it seems we can be just towards gods and humans, but it seems we can only be pious towards gods. So we can be just to humans and we can be just towards gods, but we can only be pious towards gods. Now, but if piety, if a just action that attends to the gods is really a concern for human relationships and us improving our own relationships or business dealings with each other, the social situation with each other, then that's just justice. This isn't piety. So what does it mean to attend to the gods? So Socrates just repeats, okay, but if in giving prayers and offerings and things like that, these things somehow improve upon human relationships with each other, I mean, we still got to ask the question here, what do the gods get out of it? So when we improve our own situation with each other, when we offer tithes and offerings and sacrifices to the gods, when we go to the temples and the churches and we pray and offer prayers and have feast days, to attend to the gods means that the gods have to be getting something out of it. Okay, so what is it that the gods get out of our prayers and offerings, our increasing our relationships and business dealings and social relationships with each other? So what do the gods profit by all of these kinds of things? And this is what Euthyphro says. They love it. They love it. Okay, so what is a pious action? A pious action is a just action that attends to the gods. A just action done in attendance to the gods or attending to the gods. Okay, well, what does it mean for an action to attend to the gods, since we can't improve upon the gods' godliness? Oh, well, a just action done unto the gods or a just action that attends to the gods is an action that the gods love. So if a pious action is a just action that attends to the gods, and a just action that attends to the gods is an action that the gods love, then a pious action is once again an action that the gods love. And Euthyphro says or Socrates says we've already been here. We have already said that this can't be it. That there has to be a difference between what is pious and what is dear to the gods, or what is pious and what the gods love, or what is pious and what is loved by the gods, all the gods, a certain number of gods, whatever the case may be. And what does Euthyphro do? He bails. Socrates says, "You still haven't given me an answer," and Euthyphro just says, "Another day. I have other things to attend to." So, what do we have here? What we have here is an instance where an individual who claimed to possess knowledge turns out they didn't possess knowledge. So, Socrates does think he has learned something here. He has learned what piety is not. And again, that's pretty good for a short conversation like this. So again, we may not be any closer to understanding what piety actually is, but we at least now know what it can't be. And in knowing what it can't be, we do approximate towards knowing what it is. Okay, so that will wrap up the Euthyphro dialogue, and I will see you all later.